Everybody, good morning. Welcome to our launch event for the 2025 edition of the Economic and Social Survey of Asia and the Pacific. Thank you all for joining us today. We're meeting this morning in person. We're meeting this morning in person at the Faculty of Economics at Chulalongkorn University in Bangkok. And we also thank those of you who are joining us online via Zoom from around the region. My name is Mitch Shea, and I'll be your moderator today. We are very, very honored to have Associate Professor Yong Yoon, who's from the Faculty of Economics here at Chula, joining us here in person. To his right, we also have Ms. Armida Salcia Alice Jabana, who is the Undersecretary General of the United Nations and Executive Secretary of ESCAP. Further down the line is Mr. Hamza Ali Malik, Director of our Macroeconomics Policy and Financing for Development Division at ESCAP. And finally, to my far right is Mr. Vacharin Siri Manitam, who is the Chief of the Macroeconomic Policy and Analysis Section at ESCAP. The survey is one of the annual flagship publications of ESCAP, which is the Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. The theme this year is understanding the macroeconomic implications of climate change. The survey for 2025 presents policy strategies to revive productivity growth, to promote sustained productivity-driven economic development, including through renewed interest in developmental state and green value chains. Allow me just to introduce Professor Yong Yoon very briefly. Professor Yong Yoon is an associate professor, as I mentioned, here in the Faculty of Economics at Chula. He also works as a consultant for ESCAP and ITU on trade, borrowing costs, and the 5G enablers. He is passionate about teaching and has taught in top universities around Asia and in Africa. Professor Yoon has an applied econometrician with various publications in the economic modeling of choice, family economics, labor economics, particularly informal work, employment, and gender wage gaps, and more recently, data science, where it's focusing on machine learning and artificial intelligence. Professor Yoon has earned his PhD in economics from Seoul National University in the Republic of Korea. So without further ado, I'm pleased to hand over the floor to Professor Yoon to deliver his welcome remarks.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay, good. All right, so welcome, everyone. And I have the easiest job today. It's just 2 minutes. But I'd like to, first of all, say welcome Undersecretary General of the United Nations, ESCAP, and Executive Secretary of ESCAP, Dr. Armida Alice Jabana. Also, welcome Director of Macroeconomic Policy and Financing for Development, also ESCAP, Mr. Hamza Ali Malik, and of course, Chief of Macroeconomic Policy and Analysis Section, ESCAP, Vacharin Sirimanitam. Yes. And all of you who are able to make some time to come here today for the launching of the 2025 Economic and Social Survey of Asia and the Pacific, which I think is the flagship publication of ESCAP. And it is my pleasure on behalf of the Faculty of Economics to host this event here in our building. And I hope that we will have some fruitful discussion after what I believe will be a very insightful report and from ESCAP. Welcome, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Yoon. Now I would like to invite the Executive Secretary of ESCAP, Ms. Armida Salcia Alice Chabana, to deliver some opening remarks.
Very good morning to all of you colleagues, both joining here in person as well as online, and especially I would like to extend our thanks and appreciation to Faculty of Economics, Chulalongkorn University, and through Professor Yang Yoon for hosting this event. And colleagues, I think this year's survey comes at a time of both achievements and concern. So I would like to understand the concern maybe, and I had to rewrite. I think colleagues already prepared a draft of some, some pointers, for me to say, at this opening segment of the launch. But then I had to rewrite it, because I'm sure all of you have been following what's going on in the world today, especially since April 2nd. Still evolving very quickly, very rapidly. So basically, what is going on is several fronts, of course, but then the question or the challenge to multilateralism or multilateral cooperation, that's one. And second is the question on how then, countries could come together to address various challenges that require collaboration or cooperation. And third is also, this is a big question, how then countries could coordinate and collaborate together to benefit from the various potentials, many things, such as emerging technologies. Because these kind of things needs cross-collaboration, cooperation, and maybe also to some extent coordination. So these are the big question now, being further put at the forefront by this tariff, U.S. Tariff policy. That's number one. Number two, talking about the region, because the survey is about our region, one topic, one aspect related to our region. Talking about our region, I'm sure, because all of you, majority are economists, I assume. All of you are quite familiar and well understood that the region has been progressing, has been developing for the past decades, let's say 3-4 decades, at the backbone of trade, investment, and connectivity, right? Trade, investment, connectivity through the global as well as regional value chain. This has been one of the success story of our region, right? But this become again, being a sort of also big question now, with this significant move or policy of tariff from the U.S. Right? That's number two. Second. Third, the region has been facing or undergoing or has to face several mega trends. If I may just put a few of them, climate change, which is one of the topic, of our focus of the survey, and as it relates to macroeconomic policy. Second, demographic structural change. Third is, again, this urbanization. Fourth, emerging technologies, digital as well as AI. Fifth is geopolitics. But again, the geopolitics are also rapidly changing, maybe not quite the same as the geopolitics that we understood until a while ago, This has been undergoing also quite, significant sort of realignment. So this is what we are facing now, right? And hence, if I may, would like to relate to today's discussion, which focuses on the topic of the survey. Yep. The survey takes on the topic of, again, macroeconomic policy as well as climate change. Again, unarguably, yeah, nobody can argue against the fact that climate change have impacted us. Yeah, that's one side, and the other side also, our region needs to really contribute more in terms of accelerating our climate action and reorient our economies toward resilience and sustainability. This would be the topic, yeah, of our survey. So this survey, therefore, this year's survey examines the macroeconomic implications of climate change, which is no longer a sideline issue to economic policymakers. I think it will still continue, yeah, despite the earthquake of this tariff. Several economies in our region are more exposed to climate risk because they rely on climate-sensitive, for example, agriculture, the energy, the fossil fuel as sources of economic growth. And therefore, the ability to cope with this risk is often constrained by limited fiscal space and an underdeveloped financial sector, yeah, which is still the case, yeah, still the challenge for many countries in our region. So, moving forward, the survey highlights the need to integrate climate aspects into fiscal, monetary, as well as financial policies for resilient and sustainable development. Yeah, the colleagues will highlight that later in their presentation. We are also calling for deeper regional cooperation, which is essential for navigating near-term economic headwinds. But again, yeah, these are not mere headwinds, this is earthquake. So this is also, we have to rethink, yeah, especially ESCAP as a regional commission, how we can push forward, still continue with cross-country cooperation, regional cooperation, yeah, considering this earthquake, not headwind anymore. Yeah, that would be the challenge, and I think all of you, yeah, very much welcome to share your inside perspective, including in this very strategic challenge, and all of us, yeah, are looking for good ideas and solution. Yes, so that is what I can say. Yeah, I cannot say much more. And we are at ESCAP, actually in less than 2 weeks' time, we're going to have our commission session, 21st to 25th of April. And I think this is an opportune time and opportunity. Yeah? Usually we just sort of like, the current challenges, development challenges, SDG, and so on and so forth. But this year, I think the discussion would be totally different. Yeah. And we, as the region, Asia Pacific, we are the backbone. The progress, of course, challenges and all that, yeah, but solution also, yeah. We always come up with solution, yeah, despite the crisis and so on. And this time around, yeah, because of the policy instigated sort of shock, yeah, and we see now, yeah, basically everybody is going unilateral or bilateral in the response, already 50 plus so countries, yeah, directly bilateral with US negotiating. Yeah, so this, I don't know, nobody knows, yeah. But anyway, this is just to show, just to keep everybody, aware that we are discussing everything here at the backdrop, at the background of a very rapid, yes, significant development that is ongoing and have big repercussion to everybody, including us in our region. So with that, I close and looking forward yet to hearing, of course, the presentation as well as insight from all of you. And since this is online, yeah, I think not only colleagues from across Bangkok or in Thailand, but I think this is being webcast, yeah, across the region. Maybe also beyond the region, yeah, maybe somebody from, I don't know, Europe or US, yeah, if they're still awake, are also following this discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Executive Secretary. I'm pleased now to hand over the floor to Hamza, who will give an introduction to the survey this year, to be followed by Vat, who will have more insights into the detailed findings of the survey.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. Let me thank you on behalf of my entire team who's sitting right over here at this launch of Economic and Social Survey of Asia and the Pacific. Most of you are already quite familiar, I think, with this publication. It's the longest running publication of its kind in the region, in print since 1947. A quick remark on its structure. It basically has two parts every year. One that provides an economic assessment of the near term. By near term, we typically mean next 2 years. What are the prospects for the region as a whole? What are the major developments, upside, downside risks, so on and so forth. And then every year we pick one specific theme where we go deeper into some specific area. And this year, as Ibu Amida was highlighting, we have tried to go into detail of macroeconomic implications of climate change. So thank you very much, Ibu Amida, for setting the scene. Without further delay, let me get into the business. I will be presenting a basic economic assessment of the near term, and then I'll hand over to my colleague, Vacharin, for details on the macroeconomic implications of climate change. Thank you. So you can see that, yeah. So these are basic 5 highlights. We'll start with some basic discussion on the economic outlook. We call it broadly steady and overall resilient, though uncertainty has increased, and as Ibu Amida said, has increased dramatically in the form of an earthquake kind of shocks that the economies are experiencing now. But the one question we have been asking ourselves as economists and an organization trying to keep track of economic prospects of the region is, irrespective of these shocks or events, what is the policy advice that ESCAP can offer to countries in terms of their long-term economic growth prospects? That's one much more fundamental question, and I think it's become much more important now because there are several factors that affect the productivity of economies over time, including climate change, for instance, or including major reconfiguration in the multilateral order. Then we'll delve into the, as Vat will explain, delve into the, what we call a nexus of macroeconomic climate change. It's fairly multifaceted, very complex, not easy to understand, and that's exactly what we're going to lay out, why policymakers need to try and understand how how climate change impacts macroeconomic outcomes, and how the policies introduced to change or affect climate change also have macroeconomic implications, which typically are not internalized by traditional monetary and fiscal authorities in the region. Our assessment then shows that our region is not, or all countries are not fully ready to cope with implications. And then one major conclusion, apart from many others, is we really call for policymakers, macroeconomic policymakers, to internalize, to embed climate aspects into macroeconomic policies. Otherwise, the risks that they bear are likely to increase going forward. So, let's start with some basic visuals. This is the most standard economic figure you see in every such event. 2 major macro indicators, real GDP growth and inflation. These are the average numbers for the entire region. The left-hand side shows the real GDP growth, right-hand side is the inflation. As you can see, what we call broadly resilient and stable is the line that you see on the on the left-hand panel, the red marker, right? So it's slightly lower, and if you look at before the pandemic 2019, it is lower than that as well, right? So this is what we mean by it's looking overall steady, but is heading slightly downwards. And mind you, these are the projections which were completed a month ago, or more than that in fact. So the latest developments are not reflected here, simply because we simply don't have the data at the moment to try and quantify the impact of latest developments, which are literally almost less than a week old only. We did incorporate some assessment of rising trade protectionism on these things. That's one reason you see a slight downward trajectory, but overall, we did not anticipate the scale at which it has gone down at the moment. So this is overall the picture at the moment. Inflation is beginning to converge to pre-pandemic levels, but once again, due to the recent imposition of tariffs, one likely impact is going to be on inflation in the region for sure, which in turn means the likelihood that interest rates are likely to come down is going to be
quite difficult, quite low. So interest rates might remain high, which in turn has many other implications for economies, including the fiscal position, the debt servicing costs, the ability of governments to squeeze out limited resources and invest them in public infrastructure, climate action, and so on and so forth. Not all is bad. There are some tailwinds we see when we look at the data more carefully, what we call tailwinds. So for instance, we see robust capital investments in high-tech, digital, and green sectors in the region. I'll show you one figure as well later on. A strong stimulus package has been announced by China, which is likely to have an impact, spillover effect on other regions. Why China is so important for the average figures of the entire region? Because about 42% of region's GDP of the developing countries of Asia Pacific is actually Chinese share. So Chinese developments end up having a disproportionate effect on other economies by definition once we look at the average performance of the region. Third thing, very encouraging thing we see in the data is intra-regional foreign direct investment inflows have been increasing a little bit and may increase even more now in response to these global trade and geopolitical tensions. This is something we already see in the data. So these are good signs that a region is, as I termed it, quite resilient in terms of its economic performance. In terms of headwinds, or I don't know if we can call them headwinds anymore or not, but bigger one is the obvious one, trade protectionism. So what you can see is the left-hand side, the trade coverage of new import restrictive measures. You can see the big red 3 or 4 bars in the middle. That is the impact of US tariffs imposed primarily on China back in 2018, and there was a massive increase in trade restrictive measures. You can see that again, even before the imposition of recent tariffs, now in April, even in November, the trade restrictive measures have been going up. So we were anticipating that trade protectionism is on the rise. We did assess it's going to have a downward impact on the economies, but the scale and scope and duration seems to be much, much more higher than what we expected earlier. This right-hand side picture is something we included the day before yesterday, just to show you visually which Asia-Pacific countries are likely to be impacted more due to the impact of the US imposition of tariffs. So the x-axis simply shows exports of Asia-Pacific economies to the US, and the vertical axis is the new tariff announced by the US. As you can see, Cambodia, Vietnam, Thailand, and Malaysia are relatively more exposed to the imposition of tariff in the region simply by looking at the share of their exports to the US. However, many of the smaller countries who may have relatively less space to maneuver or to reconfigure the regional value chains will also be impacted, even though their share of exports to the US is slightly smaller. And you can see several Asia-Pacific countries are listed there as well. And the size of tariff is pretty enormous. For many of them, it is over 30%, which is significant. One challenge we have been highlighting and listing down, and is still in many ways continuing since the pandemic, is the overall economy is sort of recovered when you look at the GDP, but not necessarily everybody benefited in a similar manner. What it means is, in particular, for instance, job creation or job recovery has been a bit disparate. So in some sectors, the recovery was faster, some it was not the case. Here I'm highlighting in terms of youth actually have been struggling to gain employment. So that's one major area of concern when we look at the macroeconomic prospects, which we have been highlighting consistently for several years. On the right-hand side, you see this, you might have heard this term fiscal space or limited fiscal space. In plain words, it simply means the ability of the government to respond to economic shocks, or do they have the resources to be able to invest if it's needed, or to spend in a country if it is needed, right? So as the debt levels increased in the region in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic, consequently in the following years, the debt servicing costs have increased quite a bit. For some countries, that increase had been significant. Most of them, as you see, are in the South and Southwest Asia region, with Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Bangladesh, India are having significant resources. In case of, for instance, my home country, Pakistan, about 60% of annual revenues are going for debt servicing costs. What it means is very little is left in terms of revenues to do spending on essentials, on public services, on development ambitions, on climate action, and so on and so forth, thus leaving countries no choice but to have a recourse to borrow more, which increases the debt burden going forward. So in the end, to restore fiscal and sustainability, countries are then encouraged to pursue what we call fiscal consolidation, which ends up having its own adverse consequences. So this is what we mean by risk, essentially, of the challenge is to essentially deal with the limited fiscal space in the region. In terms of policy considerations, this is a term we use quite a bit. Adopt prudent monetary and fiscal policy. What it means is, again, in simple words, don't rush into taking decisions. That's our advice to policymakers. So in terms of, for instance, monetary policy, if inflation is heading down and growth is not doing that great, the typical tendency tends to be, let's lower interest rates to try and boost the economy. Inflation is already in control. But what policymakers should keep in view is not what has already happened, but what is likely to happen in the year or 2 years down the line, because the effect of policies taken now will show up in the data a bit down the line. So in this case, we're saying that we are advising them to remain vigilant because inflationary pressures may resurge, partly because of the imposition of tariffs, and then so there are expectations of inflation, which essentially is the ultimate objective or focus of central banks, may be unhinged as well. So prudence means just wait a bit more or be careful when taking certain measures. Similarly, there is a need for many countries, as I was highlighting, to boost fiscal space. So there are three aspects to boosting fiscal space. One, revenue enhancement. Our research shows there is significant room in the region to boost that. Two, spend efficiently and smartly. Again, there's a lot of inefficient spending in the region, wasteful spending that can be improved quite a bit. And third, better and prudent debt management. So all of these measures, in a way you can say, in some sense, have relatively low-hanging fruits, which can enhance the fiscal space of countries. That should be the focus as far as economic prospects are concerned. The third is, in the context of rising trade protectionism, we are arguing or recommending safeguarding regional value chains. This is something, as Ibu Amida was highlighting, has been the strength of our region. It has flourished on trade, investment, connectivity over several decades, and it can even, I think, go further going forward. But now that seems to be under threat. When 2018 such tariffs were imposed, the region came out very resilient. Production did not shift, economies did not experience a recession. There was some reconfiguration in terms of regional value chains where ASEAN economies in particular taking advantage of relatively low productivity sector production areas and China moving up the higher value chain by moving into high-tech areas as well, right? So that kind of reconfiguration may happen again. In the interim, well, as countries deal with these implications, our advice is the countries may need support from the policymakers. Quick remark on the middle income trap, what we call, or medium-term economic prospects, long-term economic prospects. Simple question, where the economic growth is coming from in the future. So first we look at the data. One thing we notice is, the left-hand side, for instance, is the gross national income of selected countries and sub-regions as a percentage of gross national income of US. US is simply taken as a benchmark for the advanced economies. So if you look eyeballing, you can see beginning 2000 onwards, they have been in consistent catching up in a way by Asia-Pacific countries in per capita terms with the advanced countries, income convergence, up until about 2013, 2014. After that, there has been a sort of a tapering off. Further gains have not been happening, and in some cases, in fact, there have been declines. So the convergence or aspirations of Asia-Pacific countries, middle-income countries, to continue to catch up with advanced countries, with the US as one example, has been slowing down. So this is something we notice in the data. That's why the motivation of what can be done about it. Right-hand side we look at is the labor productivity growth data. Again, divided into 4 different time periods, going from 1990, and towards the left, light blue is 1990s, dark blue is early 2000, up until the global financial crisis of 2007. Black is the 2011 to 19, basically pre-pandemic, and after red is actually the latest figure. And again, you don't have to really look closely. You can simply eyeball and say the red bar is actually the smallest, or gradually the bars are becoming smaller and smaller. What it simply means is labor productivity growth on average in the region has been slowing down. This is one reason why income convergence has slowed down as a whole in the region. That's our basic assessment that we have provided in this economic survey. One traditional approach by policymakers tends to be to boost investment in capital, to increase investment in infrastructure, for instance, and so on and so forth. What we show here is gross fixed capital formation as a percentage of GDP on the left-hand side. That is reasonably strong over the years. So light green is early 2000s, before the global financial crisis, and dark green is after global financial crisis. And you can see they are comparable, in some cases going up. On average, in fact, the most right-hand two bars, the gross fixed capital formation, or capital formation simply in the economies on average, has increased. One would think it would have a beneficial impact on the economies, but not really, because on the margin, the contribution of additional investment to capital over time is definitely going to slow down, and this is what we see more visually in the right-hand side panel, where the economic growth sustained by capital formation, equivalent to 1% of GDP growth, has actually slowed down. Again, in plain words, as countries start doing better and better, they already have the basic infrastructure. To get more out of similar investment is going to be slightly less. When you are starting from scratch, building something to begin with will initially have bigger impact on the economy, right? So over time, you really have to find niche or high productive areas to go after, not a traditional accumulation of capital per se. So services sector, for instance, is one area where you need to go about high productivity sectors, or what we have argued in the survey is sectoral upgradation to boost productivity, to increase income convergence, and to go after these kind of elements is recommended. Just coming to an end of my part, what are the policy suggestions we are highlighting? So this is the left-hand side is the smile curve. I like the term quite a bit. It is simply showing the stages of production. So there's a pre-production phase where you conceive the idea, you do the research, then you start producing it, and then there is post-production activities of marketing, essentially, or selling the product, or providing post-sale services, right? So these are the global integrated value chains. So what Asia-Pacific countries, you must have heard the term, are the factories of the globe, right? So they have been primarily stuck in the production phase in the middle, which are less in terms of value added compared to the pre-production and post-production phase. So the real money or real gain in value production comes from ideas, comes from innovation, comes from research and development, or post-production services, which is now concentrated primarily in advanced countries. So if you want to move out, or if you want to move to high value chains, countries need to consider sectoral economic upgradation to go after those kind of areas which are broadly reflected in this smile curve. How do you do that? What we are arguing is essentially what we call a developmental state approach. This is different from a traditional advice coming from multilateral organizations, which you normally hear as neoclassical or neoliberal kind of recommendations, which are essentially centered around market forces delivering the best possible outcomes. Now, I'm an economist by training. I believe in the value of market, but I also understand that there are market failures, and there is an active role of the state in terms of nudging economies in the right direction, in terms of zeroing in on specific sectors which are much more productive in the region. So we are arguing in terms of having a developmental state role going forward if countries want to have long-term economic prospects, which means a nice collaboration between the state, the private sector, and businesses, and the market in a nutshell. So here are the 5 main parameters that I've listed here. In the interest of time, I will read it. There's a whole chapter elaborating on these points in the thing. Last but not least, this is what I alluded to earlier. So embrace the regional value chains as a new engine of growth. So what to do about it when you're faced with these tariffs coming from outside the region? Where you should focus on when we argue in general terms, let's have economic upgradation in certain sectors. Which sectors to go after? So we are arguing in terms of green value chains, simply because this is already the region's strength. We have in Asia Pacific unparalleled regional manufacturing value chains already exist, primarily in ASEAN economies and China. We have domestic technology innovations happening in the region. The region is actually one of the leaders now when it comes to innovations. And several economies are endowed with critical minerals that are part and parcel of these new green production value chains. And here are the examples you can see over here. So you can see China's dominance, for instance, in these areas across different areas, whether it's offshore or onshore wind, solar, electric vehicles, fuel cell trucks, just as examples. And even Asia and Pacific, the light blue bar, excluding China, is doing pretty well. So just a visual shows you Asia Pacific region is really dominating the globe, including North America and Europe, when it comes to the regional value chains. And this is what we are recommending and suggesting Asia Pacific policymakers to focus more on in terms of ensuring their long-term economic prosperity, boosting their productivity through a developmental sectoral approach of sectoral upgrades through a development state role. That's the sort of a nutshell of the entire argument I was trying to lay out. And I hope you read the draft chapter in detail, even today or later on. We'll be very happy to receive comments, feedback, suggestions. As you know, this is not a one-end game. It's a continuous endeavor to try and research and figure out what countries can do going forward. Thank you very much for your attention. Let me hand over to Vacharin.
Thank you, Hamza, and good morning to all. So my part is to cover the theme of the survey this year on the understanding the macroeconomic implication of the climate change as well as the climate action. First, let's get some basic idea. When we mentioned about macroclimate nexus, this is what we mean. We know that there's the climate change, which has the physical impact on the economy, society, which eventually feed into the macroeconomic policy outcomes. And we have the climate action, which have a transition impact through various channels. It's affecting society, whether in people health, education. Some people are forced to migrate, which subsequently could lead to some conflict. This is from the social perspective, but from the economy, there are various economic sectors that are being affected by this climate change and related action. But our focus this year is that eventually how this is feeding into the macro outcome, in particular economic growth, employment, inflation, external account sustainability, as well as our financial stability. In terms of the not only conceptual, but now showing some data and example, the size of the macroeconomic implication is noted to be really sizable, both from the climate adaptation, which is the chart on the left, and from the climate mitigation on the chart on the right. The chart on the left show you some of the estimated size of the climate adaptation cost every year per GDP. Okay? So which is really high for some of the Pacific economy. Depending on how this country secure this financing, this could have some fiscal sustainability implication. And what if they implement this sizable investment, what would be the impact on the inflation, on the external account balance, if it has to import a lot of this green technology with many macro implications. Likewise, on the mitigation, as a country move forward with the energy transition, part of the asset of the carbon sector could become stranded. They cannot be used. It has to be transformed to other things else. And this is showing the size in some of the larger economy of the region, but add up together by 2050, this could amount to about 350 billion US dollars sizable. But it's not as simple as it sounds, okay? Because a lot of these macroclimate nexus, there's still many unknown uncertainty as well as the risk. We're just giving you some example here. Every now and then you hear news about that the scientists have estimated a new climate trajectory. So actually we do not know whether next year, 10 years, 20 years from now, what would be the temperature rise, which is the ultimate goal of this climate. And as the economy, as the government react with some policy, climate policy, we don't know what is the choice of the climate policy would be, how long it would be implemented, as well as some of the actual impact. What is intended may not be at the end, which make this feedback between climate change and action to the macro outcome pretty unclear, especially including in the context of the Asia and the Pacific. So I'll show you like a simple example. If there's a global warming of the varying degree Celsius. What would be the impact on the global economic growth? The consensus seems to be that the direction of the leadership is negative. Global warming is not good for global economic growth, but the magnitude vary a lot across this study, which varying assumption and modeling, and that explain the variation. Noting all this background information, one of the key analyses that survey this year has been doing is to introduce the readiness assessment. To what extent economy in the region are ready to cope with the climate change and climate action? And to note that this is economies. So we are not talking about society. Our focus is not on, for example, early warning system. We're not talking about the adaptation, whether it physically is ready or not. Our focus is on macroeconomic. So in our context, when we say an economy is less ready or more vulnerable, we mean that two things. The first, economy is more exposed to the climate-induced economic risk, whether it's a fiscal risk or monetary or financial risk. And second, together, it has the weaker ability to cope from the macro perspective. So based on this, we did some data analysis which cover 30 Asia-Pacific developing economy. We selected some indicator which we use to measure the exposure. Okay, there are 4 of them. The first is average annual loss, which basically estimated economic loss which could happen every year due to the climate shocks divided by GDP. So for example, in Cambodia, this indicator is 10%, which means that whatever Cambodia can produce every year, GDP, 10% could disappear because of the climate shock. The second one is about agricultural value at risk of the climate as a share of GDP. In Myanmar, this indicator stands at 20%. So 1/5 of the GDP can disappear because of this, if agricultural sector could be damaged by the climate shock. The third is the carbon intensity, how much the country rely on the carbon sector. So if we going forward with the low carbon development, this country would be more heavily affected. And the last is what is the potential impact of the climate change on the size of the inflation. Taking this all together, applying some threshold analysis, and the red means that they are more exposed, orange means that they are more, but not really, and the white means sort of okay. So taking this, we have identified 11 as more exposed, and we will look at the coping ability from 3 dimensions. Without going too much detail, we look at the fiscal resource, how much the tax has been collected relative to the average annual loss, okay, whether how much the government has money to cover what if the disaster hit, to help with the people, to do with the reconstruction effort, the size of the climate finance, how well they are doing on the sovereign credit rating, which allow them to borrow at a lower cost, how prepare the financial and banking sector to absorb additional shocks, as well as the development of the financial sector in general. And the third dimension is about institutional strength, on how countries can react to this climate change, whether they have a transparency of the public finance, which help lower the borrowing cost, and to what extent the fiscal strategy are closely aligned with the government policy. With all this, and we combine this, our earlier result on the exposure, we group country into 4. So obviously, according to the color, the red is in the much more worrisome shape than others. And then the orange and the light green and the dark green. So the red are countries which we consider more exposed and having lower ability, and the dark green is less exposed. And if the climate shock happens, they also have a potentially higher coping ability to cope with that. But this assessment is on the basis that, going back, that it's uncertain impact of the climate. So this assessment is changing all the time, it's evolving, it's not fixed, and we can update this continuously. Once we have identified the country as more exposed low capability, so what the country has been doing and what they should do. Okay? So the region has not actually adopt a lot of the policies. either to reduce the exposure or to increase the coping ability. And we group this into two. The first is to manage the climate-induced economic risk. For example, the blue is the box by the Ministry of Finance, their action, and the green is the central bank action. So many Ministry of Finance in the region has been assessing the impact of the climate shocks on the fiscal sustainability, for example. At the same time, the central bank has been implementing, enforcing the disclosure of the climate risk of the financial institution. But the second role of this policy is to foster the climate action, whether to influence decision of firms, what to invest in, what to produce, and also decision of consumers like us, whether to buy electric vehicle or continue to buy the fossil fuel and traditional. And we listed some of the policy there. But the last is while implementing this policy, there are some broader considerations which we highlight only two here. The first is to balance the environmental sustainability with the well-being of the people. Okay. For example, if when the country introduced the carbon tax, the energy price will increase, and how is that going to affect the poorer people, and to what extent the government should be financially compensated for this group, and whether they have enough fiscal space to do that, that is another question. And our data show that there's been a lot of talk about this renewable energy, but the cost to produce renewable energy is still higher than the cost to produce the fossil fuel energy in many countries of the region, which means just to say that from the financial perspective alone, it makes more sense to invest in the fossil fuel energy, but not considering environmental. So how the government can strike a balance between making efficient public investment as well as to ensure that they meet the national climate goal. Another is to noting the uncertainty. We look at in the report, we look at some of how to make decisions under uncertainty. If we don't know things for sure, how should we move forward? Okay. For example, we highlight some of the strategic foresight analysis, which looking into the longer term forward and putting some of the scenario, what could be the impact of each scenario and how we can react to some of this. So just to recap from the beginning, on the macroeconomic, we have highlighted the rising global trade tension as well as the increase in the economic uncertainty as the key headwind of the region. To sustain the long-term economic growth, we encourage the government to proactively upgrade the economic sector as well as to find a way to explore how to capitalize the green value chain. We talk about the limited coping ability for some countries, and the way forward is to embed this climate factor into this macro policy. But this is not going to be an easy task for all. There is some require major shift in some of the policy tools as well as the policy framework in most of the country, as well as the point that cannot be overemphasized now, role of the inclusive international regional economic cooperation in the region. With that, thank you, and then the survey will be launched, and hopefully by now you can download the full report. Thank you.
Thank you, Vat. Thank you, Hamza, for your presentations. We do have a little bit of time for questions and answers. So we'll give the first shot to Q&A here to those participants here in the room. Otherwise, also colleagues who are following along online, feel free to share your questions in any of the chat boxes. We do have ESCAP colleagues who can respond to them as well. So I'll open up to the floor to the room. Anybody here at Chula would like to ask any questions of our panel? Everyone's always a little shy in the beginning. Yes. Can you please identify yourself and also direct your question? Mention who you're directing your question to.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Kholitai Wunyasena from RMUTP, which is one of the university in Thailand. And also, I'm a director of Decarbon, which is from Decarbonization Group in Thailand. So right now, our group focus on carbon credit trading for example, from rice farming and industry. And now Thailand have just announced carbon tax in our country. And for Asia Pacific, do you think carbon credit trading can help us to get a better situation from climate change? And is it possible that we can have international carbon credit trading for a better situation? Thank you.
Okay. We'll take a couple rounds first. Any others here in the room? Yes.
Thank you very much. Liliana Ferrer, Ambassador of Mexico. I'd just like to know if you have any comments regarding the possible role of China in minimizing the impact of the decisions that are being made in the United States regarding tariffs in the Southeast Asian region. What specifically do you think China's role in the region's countries would be? Thank you.
Okay. Any others here in the room? No? Okay. Colleagues?
Online? No? Online? From online?
No, we'll
Oh, okay.
the online ones will answer
Yeah,
online.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't understand your question. So if I get it correctly, was it trying to balance between
How can Thailand take advantage of carbon credits that are being pursued in line with now that the carbon tax has been imposed? Was that the question? You have examples on that? So, okay. I can share broad principles here because this is not the focus at the moment. The point WAC was trying to highlight is carbon credits or carbon tax is one example to try and tackle climate change, right? Our focus is to understand the macroeconomic implications of that, which is what at least I call them multifaceted and complex. What it means is carbon tax on the one side might discourage certain activities that are emitting carbon in the atmosphere, right? So in a sense that is good. But it comes at the cost because cost of goods and services will actually go up. So that's a simple example of conceptual understanding that there is a trade-off involved there before you considering that. On balance, where the country is going is depending country to country circumstances, the extent of your dependence on carbon intensity sectors to produce output, so on and so forth. The pass-through of taxes to overall prices, those kind of things, right? So that's the first one example. Carbon credits on the other side is trying to incentivize the sectors, those who are producing energy or producing goods in a sustainable manner in a much more renewable energy fashion, right? So they're incentivizing those things. Again, the idea is if you can switch, you can actually earn some credit in the process. And then, of course, if there is a market that exists, which involuntary there are many, so they can trade internally or externally, right? But is it going to be on a net basis beneficial or not? That requires a more systematic study for Thailand. Our message is essentially, from the context of today's launch, is don't jump to conclusions, for instance, in the first instance, when you say, oh, there's climate change happening, it's going to create havoc. Not really. We don't know the science accurately. We saw estimates ranging in a wide assessment, overall negative, but could be minimal impact globally on the economies or a very large impact. Similarly, when you consider policies, their impact can be all over the place. So it has to be assessed very, very carefully and on country-to-country cases. What exactly is the objective being pursued, what combination of different policies are being pursued, and how they are having opposing effect. And then on net basis, you want to go after that or not. That's, I agree, this is a conceptual response to your very specific question, but I'm just trying to tie it in with the messages that we have highlighted in the survey. Thanks.
Yes. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for taking the time to attend. Mexico, I'm sure this is also a great concern. Again, on China's response, yeah, or going forward, the role that we could expect, yeah, globally as well as in the context of the region, I think the answer is simply nobody knows. Yeah, because now, yeah, as we see, right, very fast evolving, and everybody is still grappling first to understand. First, just to understand first, right? Second is how to respond. And third is whether to respond bilaterally or also as groups. This is still evolving, yeah? What I understand, yeah, again, yeah, I'm not directly, of course, I'm not government, right? But what I understand from reading the news, social media, and so on, this is what is ongoing. So therefore, again, if I may, yeah, more, I'm apologize that this is more of a personal opinion. Yeah, what we understand from a Trump tariff is the reciprocal tariff, yeah, is being imposed not solely to reciprocate on the tariff of the partner countries, trade partner countries, but also apparently, yeah, they take into consideration other non-tariff barriers. And no clear, I don't know, yeah, no clear yardstick or a consideration, yeah. So some countries this, some other countries that, and all that, yeah. But basically, tariff and non-tariff barriers, including, for example, domestic content, yeah, including certain regulations, certain import restriction, and so on, so non-tariff. So combined, and then somehow yeah, they have some formula, and they're imposing this reciprocal tariff, although they said discounted, yeah, discounted reciprocal tariff. Yeah, this is what we understand. Yeah. Then another thing which is also evolving is the response of countries. Again, yeah, up to now we see again the latest 50 plus countries going direct bilaterally. Whether this is part of the tactic or what, so I cannot comment. Yeah, but the fact, yeah, that they're going bilaterally. Yeah, for example, again, this is quoting from the news, like Vietnam, right? Directly, Cambodia directly, and so on and so forth, yeah. European countries maybe in one front, yeah. Some countries even already held bilateral talk beforehand, right? And hence they already had this sort of informal negotiation, right? Including bigger countries, again, if I may quote, yeah, because this is in the news, yeah. For example, like India, Prime Minister already went, right? A bilateral visit and so on. And now, what I understand, again, yeah, India already go directly negotiating with US for a sort of free trade sort of negotiation. So already direct. Yeah, I don't know in the case of Mexico, also Canada, yeah. And one part, again, this is also in the news, yeah, whether the strategy is have North America sort of, yeah, US, Canada, Mexico, and Greenland, and so on, vis-a-vis, you know, Asia, for example. I don't know, yeah. And in the case of Southeast Asia, ASEAN is still grappling, not quite sure in a one front position, but Malaysia, Prime Minister already said, yeah, that we are coordinating. But in the meantime, members of ASEAN such as Vietnam, yeah, because they're directly hit, yeah, hard, they already go bilateral. Cambodia already go bilateral, yeah. And just one note, yeah, what we understand, because of the Trump first term policy towards China, trade policy towards China and so on, then this reallocation, yeah, some of the manufacturing investment and so on, including to Vietnam. And hence, that's why with the more open progressive policy of Vietnam, yeah, they could benefit, yeah, from this relocation. And hence also we've seen the progress, including economic growth Vietnam recently, the past few years, quite spectacular, yeah, including last year 7% and so on and so forth, yeah, very fast, yeah. But now they are hit hard, 46%, and I don't know, the trade with US is more than 100 billion US dollar, right? That's this totally could collapse, yeah, if they cannot act fast. So again, to cut it short, Ambassador, we don't know the answer, but this is for sure one topic, yeah, because this is very current, very urgent, one topic that we are going to discuss at the upcoming commission session in less than 2 weeks' time. So look forward again yet to have your presence there and also to hear the views from member states.
Thank you, Ias. Thank you, audience. This brings us to the end of our time for this launch of the survey. We want to thank again our panelists, Professor Yoon, the Executive Secretary, Director Hamza, and Section Chief Vat, and those of you following along online. Again, your questions, if you have any questions online, our colleagues are standing by to answer them. And then we invite you to stay also and follow up with any further questions you have of your own. One quick note, there is an evaluation of this event. If you'd like to complete it online, we encourage you to do so, please. Otherwise, I'd like to bring this event to a close and invite everybody to stick around for some refreshments and, as I said, some informal discussions and chatting with our colleagues. Thank you very much, everybody.